Okay, I was forced to watch The Game Changers. I actually watched the film for a reason. I'll talk about that later. And I wanted to give just a little bit of feedback on that. I'll talk about maybe a more in-depth review at a later time. But one of the things specifically focusing on the athletes, and as I saw the athletes featured in there and looking up what has happened with them, it's not surprising that the majority of the athletes either produced the majority of their athletic accomplishments as omnivores or meat eaters, or they went vegan and they got injured or their career got prematurely finished. I'll go through those athletes individually at a later time. The reason I had to watch the film is because Chris Kresser is going to be doing a big interview and wanted my input on that, so we spoke with Chris this morning. So one of the things that I was looking at when I was looking at these athletes, and I've known about some of them. I've already talked about the ones that were in the previews and what was really going on with them. We'll talk about those at a later time, but as I watched through the film, there were a couple of athletes I didn't know were in the film, and one of the ones that was, pointed out really towards the end of the movie was Tom Brady. Many of you guys know Tom Brady is the quarterback for the New England Patriots. He's one of the, I guess he is ultimately the winningest Super Bowl quarterback in history. Has been impressively done well with regard to longevity and performance in his career. He's in his sort of early 40s. Some of that is that the system he plays and the style of football he plays probably limits his exposure to injury and so on and so forth. But the more important and interesting thing is there was an article, and I'll include it in the description of the video, talking about his actual diet composition. And so while people from the plant-based world seem to assume that he's eating a plant-based diet, that's actually not true. Now, and why do I say that? Because according to this article, per Tom, I guess himself, says that 20% of his diet comes from meat, red meat. Typically it's wild or grass-fed meat, fish, eggs, and just a little bit of chicken, or duck. And so this is what his diet 20% consists of, and 80% of it comes from vegetables, grains, so on and so forth. And that might sound like to the average person, well, he eats a pretty plant-heavy diet, and that's not untrue. But when we talk about the meat component, and we compare that to the average American, we can look at data from the NHANES collection, where they look at food consumption, and I've put that on my Instagram, Sean Baker 1967. You can see what Americans eat. We see that if we look at the average American, from those categories, red meat, fish, eggs, and we'll just exclude chicken because he said he only eats it very, very rarely, that only makes up about 8-9% of the American diet. So he's actually eating double the amount of red meat, fish, and eggs as the average American. And so to say he's eating a vegan or vegetarian diet is absolutely silly. He's actually eating more meat. And the difference is he's not eating dairy, he's not eating chicken, and he's not eating junk food. So he's eating more meat than the average American, but less junk food. And the plants are basically inert. And so when it's all said and done, Tom's actually eating quite a bit of meat, quite a bit more meat than the average American. So this is something that when people try to hold him up as a plant-based athlete, that's completely false. It's a misconception. Like I said, if you eat meat and you don't eat junk food, you will perform well, you will be healthy, and you'll thrive. And what that amount is going to vary from person to person. Many people like myself are essentially 100% meat-based. There are all kinds of people on that scale. I think Tom would do better with even more meat, quite honestly. I think if he were to bring that meat consumption up greater than 50%, then he would be even better, from a physique standpoint, a strength standpoint, might potentially help his game. But again, you tend to stay where success is, and so if it's not broke, don't fix it, as far as his results go. It's kind of interesting, just to briefly touch on this, looking at the Tennessee Titans that were featured in the game, and I wrote down all of them that were listed, and all but one were either retired due to injury, lack of performance, or they're no longer playing anymore. So that's a very interesting observation. And this film, I guess, was filmed mostly 2017, maybe 2018, and so it's interesting to see the athletes that did that. We see these in the NFL. Cam Newton is a pretty prominent example. Currently, going a plant-based diet, doesn't seem to perform as well, particularly in that sport. There may be some advantage. I would say advantages. There may be a few athletes that can perform in these sort of maybe distance sports like ultra running, triathlon, and so on and so forth. But most of the sports doesn't seem to be a very good mix. And most of the people, most of the people in that film were either not vegan. They were possibly vegetarian, and how much meat they may or may not have eaten, or eating chicken and fish, so on and so forth. All right, guys, you guys take care. We'll talk to you in the next video. Like I said, I'll try to do a more in-depth review of this Game Changers film in the near future, but I just wanted to get this information out today, as I had to do, because I had to talk to Chris Kresser today. All right, like, subscribe, check out the links below. Like I said, I'll link the article of Tom Brady in there, and if you go to my Instagram, Sean Baker 1967, you can see the stats on the American Diet. I think it's on the Tom Brady post. I think it's like their third swipe over image. You can look at the American Diet composition, which clearly shows we don't eat really that much meat, and that's consistent with what's known about the American Diet: 2 ounces of red meat per day. Take care, guys.